Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Cedarville Stories podcast. I'm Mark Weinstein, and today on the program, I'm joined by Drew Hensley, a pastor, writer, and Cedarville University alum whose work has been shaped by both deep theological conviction and very personal experiences. Alongside with his wife, Laura, Drew has walked through the quiet, often unseen pain of infertility, a journey that led to his writing the book, Invisible Grief. So let's go to my conversation with Drew Hensley on this week's Cedarville Stories podcast. Great to have you on the program, Drew. Thanks for spending time with us. And as we start this program, I always like it for our listeners and viewers to get a better understanding of who I'm speaking with. This is my first time talking with you, so I'm learning as we go as well. But for starters, tell us about yourself, your family, your role as a pastor and an author, and what makes Drew Hensley tick.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Thanks for having the conversation. I actually went to Cedarville, graduated there in 2007 along with my wife, and I've been in pastoral ministry ever since. I've done some grad school along the way, but I'm a full-time local church pastor here now in Charleston, South Carolina. My wife and I have been married for, I have to make sure I get this right, 18 years.
Better get it right.
We have a 7-year-old that's named Silas, who we adopted at birth. I love the local church. That's really where my heart is. And, I've had the opportunity to connect with different people, whether that be leaders or authors, and that kind of opened up a door probably about 10 years ago to start writing. And so I write for different organizations online, Key Life, occasionally Christianity Today, Gospel Centered Discipleship, and some others. And then really through my wife and I, through our own experience, had the opportunity to, write this book, Invisible Grief, and really share our experience along with, I think, some things that I've learned both personally and pastorally along the way when it comes to hopes, dreams, and good desires that don't come to fruition or don't come to fruition in the timeline that we hope for or expect. And kind of what do we do with that? And so that's a little bit about who I am, and I think about where we are.
Yeah, it's always never our desire to have our dreams not fulfilled as we see them, but we do know, even though this can be viewed as trite, but we do know God's plans are best and his timing is perfect. So it doesn't ease the situation one bit. I've experienced some difficulties and disappointments, but God's ways are great, and I'm thankful for that. So when I think about you as a student here at Cedarville, I'm interested in knowing, how did your time on campus shape how you approach people, and how did it reinforce in your mind that church ministry is where you are called to be?
Yeah, I think my time on campus really showed. The heartbeat, I think, of my time on campus. What are the things that Christ truly cares about? What's on his heart? And obviously, that's people. And so a deep care for people. And I think what I experienced on campus too was connecting with, becoming friends with people that were in all different places and coming from all different places and all different experiences. And, at my time at Cedarville, and it's probably still the same, you have people who are coming from all over the country and out of the country.
Right.
And so it's kind of a beautiful melting pot. And what you get to do is you get to learn. You get to learn a lot if you spend time with people about their stories. And you get the opportunity, if you'll slow down and take it, to really stop and listen and to connect with them and to be present. And so I think that's a big part of what I took away into the local church. And I think it did instill in me even a greater heart for not just I'll say it this way, not just to be flock focused, because I think that's easy on everybody. And I think you have to do that at times, but also sheep focused. And so to really see the person right in front of you. And that's something that I still just love today, that opportunity to connect with people where they are and know that God is in the midst of that as well.
Yeah. So Drew, your heart's been with a local church. Was that your heartbeat when you came in as a freshman, or did that get instilled in you while you were here at Cedarville?
Yeah, the reason I really came to Cedarville was because I had that calling, if you will, I think in the truest sense. I felt more um, God more clearly speak and call me into local church ministry than probably anything else in my life.
Okay.
The summer before coming to Cedarville, and so yeah, the heartbeat of coming to Cedarville was to be able to get an education that provided, that challenged, and that also encouraged and helped develop
Yeah.
toward local church ministry. So
Yeah.
that was really the desire. I'm coming to Cedarville.
So I'm curious. So that calling you felt like the year before you came to Cedarville, is there a story behind that? How did God get your heart and call you to local church ministry?
Yeah. Yeah. The year before I came to Cedarville, I took what I would just refer to as the Jonah year. I graduated high school and I hadn't so much rejected Christ, rejected my relationship with him. That was still intact. But for whatever reason, I didn't feel as connected to the church. And I said, I'm just going to go to a school. I'm going to study a business degree and we'll see where that takes me. And so I did. I went to a small school in southern Missouri and I spent there a year and it was miserable. And I think it was supposed to be in a lot of ways. I came back that summer feeling a little bit confused, a little bit lost. And yet what I found that summer was really being embraced by the local church and relooking at my faith and unlearning and relearning what faith really looked like in relationship to Christ and also in relationship to church.
Yeah.
And that summer, I just really fell back in love with the church. And I was trying to discern, is this a calling or is this just something that feels comfortable? And what I found is that it felt like I would be disobedient if I didn't pursue local church ministry.
Yeah.
And that's the best way I know to describe that calling. It was this fire and this not only desire, but sense of obedience to step forward into that. So that's been the last 20 years.
So
going to Cedarville and then graduating and all that good stuff.
So from day one after graduation, you've been in the local church.
I did. I actually was able to wrap up almost my entire degree and leave a semester early. And I went ahead and got a job at a church in Atlanta. My brother and his wife lived fairly close, and I interviewed anywhere and everywhere, hoping that somebody would take this 22-year-old on as a pastor. So I stepped right in, and it was a great church that gave me a great opportunity to be a family pastor. And then I also started doing some seminary work along the way.
So you started as a family pastor. I mean, local church ministry can have various pastors, depending on the size of the church. What's your area of calling? What's your area of calling?
Yeah, preaching, teaching, and development. That's
Okay.
the three buckets that I pour into. And that's really where my heartbeat is. And so even the church that I'm at now, we do a shared pulpit. I lead and oversee teaching and also leadership development, pastoral development as well.
Okay. Let's pivot in your story, as interesting as that is, and talk about your book, Invisible Grief. I know that grows out of the journey that you and Laura, your wife, traveled in the area of infertility. Share with us, if you can, that journey and what it taught you and what you learned during that painful process.
Yeah. So for us, we were in the upstate of South Carolina back in 2012, and I was doing local church ministry. And then I had the opportunity to move to Seattle, Washington, for us to move to Seattle and to join a large church planting network there and to take part in church planting. And that's where my heart had really grown. And so we packed up, we left, we went on this adventure. We were in our mid to late 20s. And when we got up there, we felt like, all right, it's time to start growing our family. And so for us, I think that felt like a given. I had two older brothers. My wife grew up in a family of four. And so as we started that, we were in a new season, new environment, new responsibilities. About 9 months went by and nothing happened. And so we decided to make an appointment, just go see what's going on. Is there anything else we could be doing? And so we made that appointment, I think not really expecting too much. And as we did that and we had some tests run, I remember being in the in the doctor's office and her reading off results. And for Laura, it was great.
Mm.
And everything looked fantastic. And I was like, great. So tell me what we need to do. And then for me, she just shared this new word that I hadn't really heard and thought about, which was, infertility, that it's
Yeah.
going to be virtually impossible for you to have children biologically,
Yeah.
that your numbers just aren't there. And so I heard that. I don't think I fully received it. In my mind, I was still, how can we fix this? What do we need to do? Because this is a good desire. This is something that God has said is a good desire. And so this can't be the end of this conversation. Now, for us, there was a surgical option. And so we pursued that, thinking that might fix what was going on.
Is that surgery for
it
you?
didn't.
Is that surgery for you?
Surgeries for me. Yep. So
Okay.
I went under the knife and fully expecting that this would resolve everything, and came out of that and then had to wait, for a few months and got retested, and that didn't resolve everything. And they thought, well, maybe it's one more thing. And so let's do another procedure. And so I went about a month later for another surgery. And that one, as soon as I came out of anesthesia, I can see it very clearly. I looked over at Laura and she had tears in her eyes, and the doctor was in the room, and he had already shared that, this didn't work. And so this was it. And all of a sudden, this good desire became this looming dark cloud, I think, over our life. We didn't know what to do with that. I mean, you don't expect hopes and dreams and good desires to just fall like a rock right through everything. But it did. And stay for the first 3 years, of that situation, maybe 2.5, 3 years, processing of what does this mean for us? All of those things, I would say that I especially, Laura too, but me more so, I think really dealt with it in pretty unhealthy ways. Either trying to just push through that. I didn't want to feel things. I really didn't want to face what was going on. And I went to some regular habits of laughing things off with just avoidance, trying to kind of numb any feelings that would pop up. Laura kind of dealt with it in her own way. But what I realized about 3 years in, which what I would say was like a dark night of this whole moment, is none of that worked. Pain didn't go away. It didn't subside. Things didn't get better. It was the point that I think God really, he was always close, but I think he really spoke in to my life and to Laura's life and just said, you're not alone in this. And it allowed us to start being more honest about what this was, honest with God about what we were experiencing, honest with community who we had kind of pushed away. And it was painful, but in more of a redemptive way. And through that next, my goodness, a year to 2 years, that's where God, I think, really came around us and helped us heal in some ways, taught us a lot about identity, right? I'm pastoring, my wife's teaching, and there were times on Sunday where I felt completely inadequate to say anything to anyone. I even questioned if I should be a teaching or preaching pastor, because who am I to speak into these adults that have children when we don't? But a lot of thoughts come in. So I think learned a lot about identity through that, learned a lot about hope, what does hope look like, but also the reality of living life with both joy and grief simultaneously. And that's not something that's impossible. It's actually, I think, very healthy. And so, and then through that process, obviously not to hide anything that was going on, we did feel led toward adoption, and we started that process.
Yeah.
And we trusted that God would meet us there. And he has. That's not just say, hey, everything worked out. We still, if I'm being completely honest, we still hold a place within us that's still cracked and it's scarred. But like any scars that have healed, you still push on them sometimes and they hurt a bit.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. That's a very meaningful and special conversation and moment. So I appreciate your transparency. So what year was it when your dream fell out like a rock? And then how long did it take for you to finally accept what was happening?
2014 or 2013, probably toward the end of 2013, that it fell through like a rock. And I think it wasn't until somewhere around 2016 that I started to actually accept what was. And I sought help, and I actually did some counseling, some therapy. I also, as I said, opened up with community more. I think I was more honest on all fronts with myself, with Laura, with God, with others. So it was a span. I tried to run really, really hard and put on a good face and act like nothing fazing me, and that, we're just going to we're going to kind of ignore this for a few years. And I think that even with pursuing adoption, what we didn't want to do, because I knew what I had a tendency to do, which was let's just fix this. So let's grab the fastest thing we can. But I don't think that adoption, we never wanted that to be a plan B, and it hasn't been. I think that in God's sovereignty and his goodness, he always intended for Silas to be a part of our life.
Right.
We don't have all the answers to, everything in the way that it comes about. But I think that we wanted to approach adoption as, God, are you clearly leading us here? And if you are, we're going to walk faithfully through that. We're going to trust that you meet us there and you bond us with this child. And he's absolutely been faithful to do that.
And you've had Silas, I think you said 7 years now, right?
Yeah, we met him the second day he was born. It's kind of a wild story. We were actually living in Seattle. We started our adoption process. We were a waiting family, and we had two families that looked at our profiles, read our books, and they chose another family. And so we felt a little bit devastated by that. And then 2 days after my birthday, my 35th birthday, I got a call from our agent. I was at home. It's like 10:10. I can still see the clock. And she said, "Hey, there's this family in Charleston, South Carolina, or there's this birth mother in Charleston, South Carolina, and she found your profile online, and nobody does that. 98% of adoptions come through our state and read your books, but she found your profile online, and she just felt confident that you are the couple that she wants to adopt her son, and he's going to be born in 3 weeks." At that time, we were already processing potentially moving down to Charleston, South Carolina. I had already shared that with our elders. We had family down here, and the church was in a really good spot, healthy spot. We had planted a church. It was 6 years old, and I was ready to hand that off, potentially, or getting close to that. And so we were already in that process, and then we got that call. And so 3 weeks later, we jumped on a plane. Silas was born right down the street from where I'm sitting right now.
Really?
And we met him, and we felt this immediate connection with him. So he's 7 years old now, full of energy, questions, life, all of it.
So is there today a connection between Silas, you guys, and his birth parents or birth mom?
Yeah, there is. And really, we left it pretty open with her. And, she was younger. She didn't know exactly what she wanted. And we said, hey, just take your time, figure it out. And so right now, we give monthly updates where we'll send pictures and we'll write about Silas and where he is, and what he's doing, and what he's interested in. And she sent pictures of herself. And so right now that looks like the relationship that might shift in time to more, personal connection with him. But right now that's what it looks like. And we've obviously started those discussions with him about adoption. He knows he's adopted, and we've talked about kind of the beauty of that.
Yeah.
And how loved he is. And, and that's part of his story.
Yeah. This thought just came through my mind as you were talking about Silas and meeting him 2 days after his birth, right? Did his birth mom name him, or were you able to give him the name Silas?
Yeah, so that's another really fun story, is that we were debating, we had this name, and it wasn't a family name. We just really loved this name, Silas. And about a week before he was born, our agent reached out, our adoption agent said, hey, have you guys thought of a name? You're free to name them whatever you want. But the birth mother was interested. She had planned to parent Silas the first 6 months of her pregnancy. And then she came to this point of saying wouldn't be healthy for her, and didn't feel like that'd be healthy for him. And so we shared our name, and the agent came back and she said, this is insane. But she said she'd already chosen Silas.
Seriously?
Is what she was going to name him. Seriously. And couldn't make it up. It was crazy. And for her, that was super affirming.
Yeah.
Along with everything. For us, it was this like, oh my goodness. So yeah, he's always been Silas.
Oh, that's a great story. That is a great story. Obviously, it points to, God has everything arranged and prearranged and ordained, and that's a great example. Thanks for sharing that. So, in your book, you used the phrase "invisible grief." What does that mean, and why was it important to name your book "Invisible Grief"?
Yeah, so invisible grief, that the way that I would define it is the pain and loss of unrealized hopes, dreams, and good desires. Another way to say it would be, the pain and loss of what has never been and may never be.
Yeah.
And so, traditionally, when we think about grief, when we think about death, we think about physical body, or occasionally the death of a relationship. But it's something that's more tangible. It's something that has memories attached. That is something that You've been able to feel and touch. And I think when it comes to this type of grief, what has never been and may never be there, that's not there. There's no memories attached. There's no realities to come back to. It's this thing that's never come to fruition. And yet it can be such a heavy weight. It's also what's, deemed as complicated grief, which, people who write on grief and psychologists, they would say it's more rare. But if you look at grief, not just through the aspect of death or loss of life, complicated grief is very common, meaning long-term grief, long seasons, or even a lifetime when it comes specifically to invisible grief. And I think with this type of grief, when it comes to those things that have never existed, but we hold really close, it oftentimes is invisible to those around us. It's something that we feel deeply, and maybe we've let others know, but it doesn't stand out or stick out. It's not as evident. And a lot of times it can go unseen. And so for me, it was important just to phrase it as that, this grief that's not as easily seen, but this grief that so many are feeling in our churches, schools, all around us.
Yeah.
And I named a lot of those in the book, whether that's infertility like us, whether that's the desire to be married and that hasn't come to fruition, whether that's abandonment and not having those relationships with parents, loved ones, whether it's mental or physical, challenges that have prevented a certain future or even community in the way that you always hoped or dreamed. I mean, it can take they can come in a lot of packages, but it really comes back to the same thing. This good desire, this hope or this dream that hasn't come to fruition.
Yeah. And hearing you talk, and we'll talk about lament in a little bit, but that's where my mind goes, to learning how to lament this grief. But as a pastor, Drew, I'm sure you see people walking through pain every day in your congregation, in your community. What does honest prayer look like when these people are hurting, they're disappointed, and they don't know where to go?
I think that's a critical piece. And what I go to is that, lament, which I think about, turn, ask, and trust. But first turning to God. And I think that we can take a lot from David's example in the Psalms. His Psalms, the majority of those Psalms, especially the ones where he's really feeling the weight of what is, I think what honest prayer looks like is it looks like not trying to clean up those prayers. I think there's this fear that can come over us that if we're too honest with God, that puts us in a dangerous place. But I think what we see is that God wants us to be honest, and he wants us to share where we truly are. And he's big enough to handle that.
Yeah. He's
not thrown off by it. And we see that with David. And so I think it's an honest prayer looks like, God, here's, even in me praying for others in our congregation or people who are experiencing this, God, here's what is, and here's the desire. And God, I believe this is good. And if it's not, show me that, right? Make that clear. If there's anything in me or in this that's not of you, make that clear. But God, would you hear this? And I want to bring that to you. And I want to ask that you would actually meet me here. God, would you meet me here? Would you make this desire come to pass? Or would you make it clear what you could have for me? If you have other plans, make that clear. And then I think it's that wrap up with trust. I mean, that's what it comes back to. You see that with David. It's God, how long? Where are you? Have you abandoned me?
Right.
And then yet he speaks back to God, the promises of God, and he comes to this place of I'm going to trust you. I truly believe that even if it's difficult for me, even if I don't understand what's going on, even if I don't agree with you in this moment, I'm going to trust you in this. I believe that you're good. I believe that you have good for your children. I'm one of your children. And God, would you help me to trust you in this?
Yeah.
So that's where I come to with this on.
So as you're walking through your journey, did it help you to become a better prayer per se, to be more honest with God? Did you see that in your life?
I did. I saw prayer become more genuine, heartfelt. I would even say organic in the sense of, what I found before is sometimes I would allot times to pray. I would pray at certain times, and what came about was a much more relationally close experience with God and time with God, where I was praying throughout the day, where I was praying in the car, where I would find myself literally pulling off to the side of the road and just praying. And that prayer took a lot of different forms. Sometimes it was aggressive, and I would have to come back talk to God again and say, I confess what I said. It was not my place, right? And I need your forgiveness. But it became much more intimate, I think personable. It became less polished. I think I had this idea of what prayer should be and what it should look like. And I would say that I even had, in some ways, more of a pharisaical look on prayer.
Yeah.
Or I wanted to have, perfectly polished words as if those were going to be more meaningful.
Right.
But when all of that kind of wiped out, what I found was just a much more honest prayer life.
Sure.
And it's still been that way. And it's feels so much more closely connected with God and I think his heart. And that was really good. I think there were a lot of gifts that came from the grief, but I think that would be one of them.
I think when we, and I'm guilty of this even today at times, if I'm praying in public, especially in public, I want my words to be polished, to be $5 words. So people really what it is pride, right? I want people to think, oh, I have a great relationship with the Lord, when he just wants our simple heart. And that's what you learned. So Drew, I grew up in the church probably from week 2. Okay. If the door was open, I was in the church. I didn't maybe walk in it, but I was there. And I really don't recall until recent years learning about the concept of lament and lamenting. Why do you think in the church that's missing or maybe misunderstood?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I agree. I think the art of lament, if you will, has been lost in the practice of that and the worship of it. I think one big reason is because we live in such a fast-paced culture, to be honest. We have such busy lives. We have so many things on our calendar, and there's always something else that we could be doing. And so I think that that's one aspect of it. I think that there's that push or there's that temptation just to keep moving forward. When lament really requires you to slow down. It requires you to sit. I mean, if you look at Lamentations, right? It's this sitting and weeping over a city, over people. And it can be uncomfortable. I think that's another thing is we obviously don't like pain and we don't like sitting with pain, right?
No.
And that makes sense. That makes sense in a lot of ways. And yet I think that it's so critical for us to do that. And so I think it's a thing of pace. And I think it's also a thing of comfort. We love comfort and we have a lot going on. And so I think with a combination of those two, the invitation to sit and lament and be honest about what is without a time clock can easily be lost.
Yeah.
And yet I think it's so important for us if we truly want to heal. I think back to what Jesus says when he just says, do you really want to be healed? And I think for those who are experiencing grief, he's saying, do you really want to be healed? Well, then you need to slow down.
Yeah.
And you need to sit with me and you need to sit with this and you need to let me dress your wounds.
Yeah. It's an important lesson to learn. It's a hard one to learn in our fast-paced society. I understand. I especially in my work, I can keep moving and making things happen or doing different things. I haven't learned at my advanced age to slow down like I need to. So in your book, you speak about obviously infertility, to singleness, chronic illnesses, and other unseen losses. Why was it important to include all those kinds of issues of grief in your book?
Yeah. The book got rejected from several publishers because they felt like it was too broad, which I totally understood.
Okay.
So it was, it was like, hey, maybe you should just write on infertility. And my pushback was, I read the resources on just infertility, and I felt like this type of grief, because I had encountered so many people along the way in our own grief and then in just pastoring people. What I found is that I think this kind of resource or this kind of lens, it was something that would have really benefited us when we were walking through our grief. Not just to focus on one tiny aspect of it, but even if these things are packaged differently, I think they all come back to the same place.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to write something that was a little more broad and a little bit more church centric in saying, hey, and that's that was the beauty, I think, of being able to include other people's stories in the book. So the book's packed with stories from people that I have pastored, people that I've been connected with over the years. And so my hope was to shoot a shotgun blast at the beginning and to give people different handles to grab onto through the stories, and yet bring that back to this narrow kind of ending of, what does the gospel have to say about this?
Yeah.
And how can we move forward with both joy and grief?
Yeah.
So that was my real heartbeat, more from the pastoral lens of saying, I think this is a little bit broader than just infertility.
Sure.
And I think that we can package this in one book.
And finally, a publisher agreed. And when was the book published?
That's right. So the book was published in January, so about 3 months ago. Through Christian Focus, which great publisher out of the UK. And it was great to collaborate with them, work on this project together.
So where can people find and pick up a copy of the book?
Yeah, you can go to the biggest bookstore in the world, on Amazon. And you can grab a copy if you like. You can also, you can obviously go to other places too. It's all over, Barnes & Noble, Christian bookstore, all those things. But you can snag a copy anywhere it's readily available.
Well, I encourage our viewers and listeners to pick up a copy of Invisible Grief and read it, and then pass it on to someone that who could use some encouragement, because I know this book offers great encouragement through Drew's writing. So if someone does pick up Invisible Grief, Drew, what do you hope they walk away with?
Yeah. I hope they walk away absolutely seeing a God who knows them, loves them, sees them, is in the midst of whatever they're walking through.
Yeah.
I hope they walk away with knowing that whatever they're experiencing does not define them, that they are ultimately a son or daughter in Christ of God. And I hope they walk away with the hope of knowing that grief, and no matter what they might face, it doesn't get the final word, that God will restore all things, that there truly is an everlasting hope. Even if things don't come to fruition in this lifetime, they will.
Yeah.
And that's not a platitude. I think that's our real and living hope. And that's what it means to live with heaven in our sights. And I think when we're able to do that, we can actually experience this healing that allows us to move forward with both joy and grief, knowing that this isn't it. It doesn't win.
Yeah.
That ultimately God gets the final word of all of this.
Amen. My final question, Drew. So what's next for Drew, Laura, and Silas Hensley?
I actually have a new book that I'm working on. So I signed a contract about a month ago with Moody Publishers out of Chicago.
Yeah.
And I'm working on a book called Made for Approval, but then in parentheses, just not theirs. And so going back to this kind of cultural idea and pressure of performance, approval seeking, feeling like I need to be more, all of those things. And the book really tracks back to Genesis 1 and says, instead of looking at this and saying that this is bad, looking at it and saying, actually, this is a part of our wiring that's just gone a bit sideways. And so this desire to be seen, to be known, to be loved, liked, and delighted in isn't a bad thing. It's just become a distortion with the broken world in which we live.
Yeah.
And the eyes that the place where we can find rest, obviously, is in Christ's gaze and in being in Christ. And so working on that project right now. That's fun to work through. I've got a new podcast that's starting through Key Life Podcast Network later this month. And so much around the same kind of Christian living, looking at faith and life, but it's called Still Becoming, and just looking at faith in real life. And we'll have some great guests on there and conversations just about different aspects of faith and where it's not completely polished and we haven't arrived, but we're still learning and growing and all of that good stuff.
That's great.
Yeah.
I encourage our listeners and viewers to check out Drew Hensley's book, Invisible Grief. Check out his podcast coming up soon. And boy, Drew, I enjoyed our time together. And just for your transparent communication in your heart to minister to people, primarily in the local church, but also through your communications. So thank you for that. And thanks for joining me this week on the Cedarville Stories podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Cedarville Stories podcast, brought to you by Cedarville University. To learn more about Cedarville University, visit our website at cedarville.edu. And be sure to come back next week when we'll share another Cedarville story for God's glory.